Matthew chapter 21. Today we are going to talk about the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. Today all over the world, this day is celebrated in the Christian circles as Palm Sunday. Because when Jesus entered the city of Jerusalem, all the people celebrated it. In some parts of the world, this is a very big festival. This is a very great festival. There are people who take palm branches and then the whole church goes around the church. Or some people go into the streets, they give the gospel, and it's quite a big thing in some parts of the world. But today we're going to listen to and learn from what happened at that point of time. Okay, so there are a few lessons that we will learn from this wonderful story. Chapter 21 of Matthew, and from verses 1 to 11. As they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there, with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, tell him that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away." This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet. "Say to the daughter of Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, on the foal of a donkey." The disciples went and did as Jesus had instructed them. They brought the donkey and the colt, placed their cloaks on them, and Jesus sat on them. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds went ahead of him, and those that followed shouted, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest!" When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, "Who is this?" The crowds answered, "This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." This story that you find about the triumphal entry of Jesus, you can find in all the Gospels. You find them in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now, what we are going to look at today is, before Jesus went into that whole series of events that led to his crucifixion, there are certain things that I wanted to talk to you. There are 3 important points that I wanted to share with you regarding the pre-crucifixion days of Jesus Christ. He came into Jerusalem, and the way he came into Jerusalem is also prophetic. One thing we need to understand about Jesus Christ is everything from his birth till the day he left this earth, everything was pre-written. So what you could say is there are 2 ways of looking at this. One is we could say the prophecies were fulfilled by Jesus, okay? Or you could also say that Jesus fulfilled those prophecies. There's a lot of difference. Prophecies were written and Jesus acted upon those prophecies in fulfilling them. In other words, you could also say that Jesus knew those things and he fulfilled those prophecies. So there are certain prophecies that we will certainly look here and there. But if you look at what happened here, it was already written by Zechariah, that chapter 9 and verse 9, that the king will come on a donkey. He will ride on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So this was written some hundreds of years ago. And that particular day, Jesus sat on this donkey. Now please remember, Jesus proved himself that he is God almost at every stage, but people were blinded. They did not recognize. I want you to look at this beautiful expression in Luke chapter 19. You find the same story, chapter 19 and verse 34 and 35. Jesus told them what? He said, "Go to the village and there you will find a donkey and a colt, and untie them. Do you need permission for doing that? No. Go ahead and do that. If anybody objects, what do you tell them? The Lord needs it. The Lords need them. The Lord needs them. Okay? So, in Luke chapter 19 verse 34, he says, when the owners asked, see, you go to somebody's house and the owner has his donkey and the colt, you just straight away go and untie. I mean, they're going to catch you, right? They're going to catch you. So, when they were untying, the owner asked, where are you taking this? What is the answer? They replied, verse 34, the Lord needs it. The Lord needs it. Now the word Lord can mean a lot of things. Now these disciples are saying the Lord needs it. So it's a big question mark. So we have to find out who this Lord is. In the same chapter 19 verse 35, Luke 19:35, when they said the Lord needs it, see where did they bring? They brought it to Jesus. The Lord needs them, or the Lord needs it, is what they said there. And these people brought it to Jesus. What does it prove? That Jesus is the Lord. Jesus is the Lord. Every place you find, every place it is written, the Lord needs them, or Lord needs it. And ultimately they brought it to Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ rode on this donkey. So when Jesus Christ was riding on this donkey, the prophecy came from him, is it not? He is the originator of the prophecies. So when he is doing all these things, don't you know that he is fulfilling all of this? This morning in the Sunday school when we were talking about Matthew 26 and where the Lord's Supper was being discussed. Okay, the Lord's Supper was being discussed. This is the thought came to my mind. A very good question that we had in the Sunday school was, every time they always did the Passover. That's nothing new for them. From the day they came out of the land of Egypt, they've been observing Passover. So that night when Jesus took the bread and broke it and gave it to his disciples, and then while they were doing it, and they thought it's a regular Passover. It's a regular Passover. But they got a shock of the life when they heard Jesus saying what? This is my body. Man, this is a new teaching. I just went back in my imagination and thought, this is not the first time Jesus is observing the Passover. I'm sure from his childhood he must have observed the Passover. So every Passover, every passing Passover, what do you think Jesus was probably thinking? Okay, my day is coming. My day is coming. Every time he took part in the Passover, always thought, okay, I'm going to die on the cross on the Passover day. I'm going to die on the cross on the Passover day. So Jesus was fulfilling the prophecies. He never hesitated from fulfilling what he was sent for. So Jesus proved himself that he was God. What happened was, when he entered inside, these people put their clothes on the donkey. They spread clothes on the road and also put the branches. Now you may say, what does this mean? What does this mean? Have you ever seen the president walking and people put branches and their clothes on the road? No. See, this is a very similar story which happened in 2 Kings chapter 9. 2 Kings chapter 9 and verse 13. This is where Elisha sent one of the guys, and then he anointed a man called Jehu to be the king over Israel. So when Jehu was anointed king of Israel, what happened there? Chapter 9, 2 Kings chapter 9 and verse 13. They hurried and took their cloaks and spread them under him on the bare steps. Then they blew the trumpet and shouted, Jehu is king. Did you see where this comes from? So it is to honor, like today you have, the best case scenario for today is what? Red carpet welcome. Right? Today we call it as a red carpet welcome. The greatest honor that you can give to somebody. So Jesus is coming into Jerusalem and people are giving him a great grand welcome. Now they are also shouting, verse 9, the crowds that went ahead of him and those that followed shouted, Hosanna to the Son of David. Why are they shouting Hosanna to the Son? I mean, have you ever thought, why did these people actually celebrate? What is there to celebrate? Did you ever think about that? Now, we have to go into history a little bit. From the time Zedekiah was taken into captivity, who was the last king of Judah, Israel never had a king. They never had a king. They were always subjected, or they were subjects under somebody's rule. Started with Babylon, came to Medo-Persians, then the Grecians, Alexander the Great comes into picture there, and now Romans. So they didn't have anybody to claim themselves as the king. Now, Hosanna is what? The word Hosanna means to save. The word Hosanna means to save. It also is a political term. The word Hosanna is a political term. What do they want Jesus to save them from? The Jews are shouting and saying, hey, Jesus, we are tired of this Roman Empire. We are tired of being subjects of all these people ruling over us. Now, let us have our own kingdom. So when Jesus came on this donkey, people thought Jesus was coming to create a coup so that he can topple the Roman government and Jews can have their own kingdom. Not only now, the Jews continue to have this thought even after Jesus rose again. In Acts chapter 1, we read this before, read it again now. Acts chapter 1 and verse 6. So when they met together, they asked him, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? Now if you talk to a Jew, they will tell you the same thing. What? We are waiting for the kingdom to come. We are waiting for the Messiah to come and establish the kingdom. Okay? Now here you find that these people thought, now it is a time for us for deliverance. That we will not be subjected. For example, let me tell you, the Jews had to undergo a lot of trouble, especially because of the Romans. Okay? Because of the tax. You know, the tax was a very big problem for the Jews those days. And that's why the tax collectors were considered very the disrespected people. People did not like them. You see, Zacchaeus was a tax collector. And people said, this man is going to the house of a sinner. Matthew was a tax collector. And you are living there, but you are paying tax. What did Jesus say? Give to God what is God's, and to Caesar to what belongs to Caesar. So they were paying a tax. And Jesus even himself had to pay tax. That's why when he said to Peter, go and put your go to the waters and then do what? Put your angle there and you will find a fish. And that fish will have a coin, pay for you and me too. So these people had to pay the taxes. So when you are under somebody's rule, there's a lot of trouble. So what these people did was they were waiting for a Messiah who will come and redeem them and give them independence. Now tell me, which country does not celebrate its independence? Oh my goodness. Every country which has celebrated its independence has a history behind it. There was an oppression. There was somebody trying to subjugate you. You know, the word subjugate means to put under yoke. And these people were under such a subjugation. So what happened is, you find somebody who fought for you, your country, and got you the victory. You got the independence. July 4th in America is a very special day. People remember what the day of independence is. Every country admires and reveres and celebrates its day of independence. They thought, the Jews thought, we found a guy who can help us celebrate our independence, who will help us get the independence. And that's why you see verse 10. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, "Who is this?" The crowds answered, "This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." Now, people's way of thinking is different, and the way Jesus looked at things was different. Now, here we come to the important thing. They thought Jesus was going to redeem them and help them get the victory. Now, if you immediately see what happened right after this is a powerful story. From verse 12 to verse 17, verse 12, see, the first thing that Jesus did as soon as he entered Jerusalem was very contradictory from what the people were expecting. What are the people's expectations? That he will help them establish a kingdom. He will be the king, and we will have our own kingdom. That's what the people's expectations were. But what did Jesus do? Chapter 21 verse 12. Matthew 21:12. Jesus entered the temple area and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. "It is written," he said to them, "My house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers." What did Jesus do? Because of this, in John chapter 2, you find the story. What did he do when he saw all this happening? Chapter 2 and verse 15. Verse 15. "So he made a whip out of the cords and drove all from the temple area, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves he said, 'Get these out of here. How dare you turn my Father's house into a market?' His disciples remembered that it is written, 'Zeal for your house will consume me.'" Did you see that? What did Jesus do here? Jesus entered Jerusalem to cleanse the temple. Jesus' thought was very different from what people were thinking. They were looking at the physical kingdom. Jesus was thinking much beyond that. As soon as see one thing, when you go to a new country, or you come back to your hometown, or you come to a place after a long time, you will have something on your mind, isn't it? Yeah, you will have something to do first in your mind. Let me tell you, when I was in my fifth grade, no, I was in my, I think I was in my, yes, I was in my seventh grade when I went to another state. And after 3 years, I came back. After I came back, I had all my friends. You know the first thing that was in my mind? I must go and meet all these guys. I must go and meet all these guys. Believe me, as soon as we reached home, and we didn't have to do anything because my dad had soldiers who would do everything, set up the house. So the first thing I did was, I told my dad, "Dad, I'm going out to see my friends." So my dad said, "All right." So I went and met one guy and said, "Hey, where are our other classmates?" So we went to each house. I met my friends and said, "Hey man, how are you? A long time." So when I came back to my place, I had something first on my mind. That was my priority. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, his priority was cleansing the temple. Because Jesus, this is what the Word of God says. Anybody who destroys my temple, what will he do? He said, "I will destroy them." Very harsh words that you hear from Jesus. See, the reason Jesus did all this is because, I'll tell you the reason, okay? Luke chapter 19 and verse 42. Luke 19:42, and said, "If even you had known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you and encircle you and hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another, because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you." You see that? You did not recognize the time of God's coming. And therefore these people were living a reckless life. Jesus came and said, this is not happening in my house. This place is called a house of prayer, but you made it a den of thieves. So he cleansed the temple. So in the process, what did he do? What did Jesus do? The three things that he fulfilled. Number one, he came on a donkey. Number two, he came and cleansed the temple, right, in this process. And he also fulfilled another verse from Psalms which says, the zeal of your house consumes me. Okay, so whatever Jesus did was as a part of the fulfillment. Okay, right. So when Jesus did this, when Jesus did all this, it is basically because he got angry. He got angry at them. And that's called holy anger or righteous anger. Why? Because these people were not in right tune with God. Just imagine in John chapter 2, the first part of John chapter 2 is where Jesus made wine. He turned the water into wine. In the same chapter towards the end, you find he made a whip. In the same chapter, it's interesting, that's a good way to remember. Jesus made wine in the same chapter where he made a whip at the end. Okay, so you must remember that whatever Jesus was doing is a part of the prophecy. He was trying to please God in everything he did. Another thing that we need to remember is, the first thing is he entered Jerusalem according to the prophecy. Number two, he cleansed the temple. And number three, before he went to the cross, he received a worship. He received worship. Let's see what that means. Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26 and verse 6. While Jesus was in Bethany in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured out on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste? They asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you. But you will not have me always. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. I tell you the truth, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. So before Jesus, so immediately after this, you find what? Verse 14, Judas has agreed to betray Jesus. So before Jesus went to the cross, what happened? This woman broke the alabaster jar. You know, how expensive was that alabaster jar? It was worth years' wages. Okay? It was worth a year's wages. What do you mean a year's wages? In Mark 14:5 you find this. It could have been sold for more than a year's wages, and the money given to the poor. More than a year's wages is what? How much? Yeah? According to the calendar of the Jews, it is 300 denarii. Okay? 300 denarii. Those days. It's 300 denarii. So, for each day, you should be paid how much? 1 denarii. So it's 300 denarii. So if you take today, it's I think $3. 1 denarii should be $3. So going with that alabaster jar cost how much? $900. Can you? That cologne, that perfume cost how much? $900. Have you seen how many people can buy a $900 perfume? I mean, $100 itself looks like, it's kind of expensive, right? And you want a bigger bottle if you want. $900 perfume. What did she do? She just broke it. 1 whole year's wages. She just broke it and anointed him. You know what is the meaning of that? I give my best to you. I give my best to you. Whole room was filled with fragrance. And what are the legalists saying? This could have been sold and then given to the poor. Because that is all what they know. They fail to recognize Jesus Christ. And Jesus said, wherever this gospel is preached, this woman will have to be remembered. Can you imagine that? This woman who broke a 300 denarii jar is known all over the world. All over the world. We don't know that woman's name. She is known all over the world. Why? Because Jesus promised and said, wherever this gospel is preached, there people will know her, what she did for me. When Jesus was born, he accepted worship. When Jesus was about to die, he accepted worship. When Jesus was risen again, he accepted worship. When he ascended into heaven, he was worshipped. And the only person who can accept worship is God and God alone. You find what Jesus did in the pre-crucifixion scenario is that he was fulfilling one prophecy after another. At the same time, he was proving himself at every stage that he is God. That he is God. So 3 things to remember, whatever Jesus did. Number 1, he entered Jerusalem to fulfill what was written. Number 2, he cleansed the temple according to the prophecy. Number 3, he received worship because he is God. He is God. I was thinking this morning, let's take 2 people. Jesus and Satan. Jesus deserves the worship. Satan desires the worship. Did you get it? God deserves the worship, but Satan desires the worship. God deserves it. Satan desires it. But just think, who can explain what happens in a worship better? Is it God or Satan? God. Because Satan is outside the realm of worship. He saw it from a distance. He saw what a glamour it is, what a gorgeous thing it is, what a great thing it is to be worshipped. He said, I want that. Did he have it? No. No. The very thought that came to his mind, God threw him down. So God alone is worthy of that worship. You find such a great God, such a wonderful God. You know what happened to him? In a week's time, in a less than a week's time, within this week, he was hanging on the cross, naked, with a crown of thorns on his head, bleeding hands, nails pierced in his hands and feet, mocked by people, counted among criminals. You find all the prophecies that you find that is written about him. Yeah, Psalm 22:16 says he was. Isaiah 53:12 says he was numbered with the transgressors. And the place where Jesus died was in the midst of 2 thieves. Mark 15:27, Luke 23:32. They all tell you that these people were the criminals, and Jesus was counted among the criminals. So whatever, they cast lots for his garments. Not one of his bones were broken. He was. He would be mocked. Yeah, he'd be mocked, it said. They will stare and gloat over me. Psalm 22 verse 17. That is fulfilled in Matthew 27:36. The people, with the way they treated him. Can you just imagine? Just a week before, just less than a week before, these people are shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna. In 4 days they said, crucify him. Crucify him. And yet, he obeyed the will of God and said, Lord, if I don't do this, there's no salvation for mankind. And that's why he chose to die for us. And as we come into this week, as we come close to Good Friday, we all have to remember what Jesus did for us on that cross. The events that led, it's very difficult for somebody who was celebrated by the whole country on a Sunday, and then in 4 days, when the same people who took the palm branches and were shouting and then singing, the same people now shout against Jesus and said, crucify him. It's very difficult to take that. The worst part was not that. The worst part was when Jesus was hanging on the cross and he shouted these words, my God, why have you forsaken me? These were the most powerful words. And that also was fulfilled by Jesus. So we will get into this phase of meditating on what Jesus did, and then we will glorify him and we praise him for what he did. And he proved himself at every step that he is God. May God help us to understand that he fulfilled the prophecies. And so I would end with this and say, he also made a prophecy that he will come back again. So when he fulfilled all these prophecies, he would fulfill the other prophecy also. Say what? I am coming soon. Behold, I am coming quickly. And Jesus is coming back soon. Okay, let's pray.